Hello, my amazing people. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on your time zone or anytime you are coming across my platform. If it's your first time and you like what I'm doing here, kindly subscribe, put on your notification bell to all notifications, and that way you'll be able to know when we upload a new video. Here in Linda's TV show, we react to all forms of videos, local, international, especially what is happening in Nigeria. I want to appreciate YouTube. Yes, I will keep on appreciating them for creating this wonderful platform that we are using to disseminate information to the members of the public. At the same time, I put a disclaimer. Yes, I need to inform YouTube what I am doing here. I put a disclaimer that this platform, Linda's TV show, do not and will not promote hate speech, violence, misinformation. We are here to educate, inform the members of the public about what is happening. In fact, myself, I don't like hate speech, I don't like violence, I don't like misinformation, and I don't like instigating war. But I want to inform YouTube that a call for self-determination is not a call of war. Please.
Simply to bolster up the forces of feudalism and so prolonged the oppression of the people. As was traditional, the peoples of the North did not meekly give in to the rulership of the Fulani. They strove hard to pull down the strange rulership, especially because it completely took away the political freedom to which they were accustomed. Unfortunately for them, the British came in at that particular time with a superior military force and imposed the peace of Britain, rubber stamping the Fulani hegemony over the whole area. After that, every effort by the people to be free was regarded as a rebellion against British rulership and was forcibly suppressed. From this, we can easily understand why there was a fundamental difference between the political aspirations of the leaders of the North and South. In the South, political leadership sprang from the people, that is, from the grassroots. These people had been the custodian of their own civic rights before the British came. It was easy and natural for for common people to be active again. When political agitation for national freedom became a popular preoccupation of Nigerians in the 1940s. In the North, however, the ruling class, made up of the sons and kinsmen of the emirs, took over the political leadership of the people. Unfortunately, they represented their own class interests rather than the popular will of the masses. This happened because the British governed Nigerians indirectly through their traditional rulers. In the South, they governed through the Obas, Obis, and Amayanabos, who were relatively powerless amongst their people. In the North, they governed through the emirs, whose sons and kinsmen were the chiefs and native authority officials, who lorded it over the people. These emerged as the aristocratic political leaders of the 1940s. As a result, the true leaders of the masses were hamstrung and held down. So British concept of tripartition. So from the outset, the British governed the North as a monolithic unit, merging the separate kingdoms of Borno with the Fulani Emirates. They also governed the South as a unit until the Richard's Constitution of 1946, which split the South into two, establishing a country with three large regions. From these, three centers of power were established: Kaduna in the north, Ibadan in the west, and Enugu in the east. Each region was administered from its center of power by British representatives called lieutenant governors. The overall coordinating center was Lagos, where the governor resided. This was the pattern that led to the independence of Nigeria. With the calling forth of regional representatives to the Constitutional Conference that followed, the political leadership of the country split into three, so that the British motive of divide and rule was exemplified. It must be noted that this political arrangement by the British was not necessary. They could, for instance, have carved out a region for the Kanuri in the northeast. Since that area was never captured by the Fulani, they could also have carved out a region for the Yoruba of Ilorin and the TV of the Benue, since their areas were geographically and ethnologically distinct from the Hausa areas further north. However, the British chose the tripartite arrangement because it was more to their purpose of keeping Nigeria perpetually within their sphere of influence, even after independence. A quick one, guys. If you are listening in, especially if you are listening in on Facebook or YouTube, the audio is so very much important. You need to let me know if the audio is perfect, and I'll keep checking. The reason is because I could be so soaked into reading this that I may not even read comments or look up or do all that. So please let me know if our audio is great. So my friends on TikTok, sorry that it's almost the same. Your own audio is pretty much perfect. You're just listening in. That's what it is. All right. Thank you. Now let's proceed. And also another question. Is the reading and the rhythm of the reading manageable for you? Not too fast, not too slow, or what have you, and clear? Also, let me know that too. Thank you. And as you are joining, just remember to share the broadcast. A lot of people have heard about this book. A lot of stories have been made up about the first coup in Nigeria. The Igbos have been blamed for the coup. And a lot of you grew up believing that Igbos planned the first coup, and that was what led to the Cold War, that the Nigerian system is foisting on them. So indeed, it has to be clear. It has to be kind of understandable. And I'm going to need your help doing that. You see, I've not got my headphones on. So I want to believe that if you say it is perfect, then we can proceed. Thank you. Here we go. So, see this man. He's a popular face, right? Sardauna of Sokoto. So that is Alhaji Amadu Bello, the Sardauna. So, let's continue, rather. So for them, Amadu Bello is a crown prince, sort of, okay, of Sokoto. So he emerged as the leader. He came from the ruling class, the stock of the emirs. Therefore, he represented his class interest. In the West, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, a lawyer, and in the East, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, a journalist, emerged as leaders. These three personalities held sway as the leaders of their political parties, which had gained power in in the north, inclusive of the northern Cameroon, and was in charge of the regional government. Chief Awolowo led the action group, which was the dominant party in the west, inclusive of Lagos, while Dr. Azikiwe led the National Council of Nigeria and Cameroon, NCNC, which had gained power in the east, inclusive of southern Cameroon. This was the position in October 1953, when the federal constitution was first introduced into Nigeria. As it was, each of the three governing parties had opposition parties in their respective regions. In the north, opposition to the NPC oligarchy had started to rear its head in the form of two political mass movements: the Northern Element Progressive Union, NEPU, which was based mainly in Kano and Kaduna, and was led by a school teacher, Malam Aminu Kano, and the United Middle Belt Congress, UMBC, which was a merger of both the Middle Belt People's Party and the Middle Zone League. It was based in the Benue and Plateau provinces and was led by another school teacher, Joseph Tarka. This latter party was foremost in agitating for the Middle Belt states, which was sought to be carved out of the northern region. It was because the UMBC saw the action group as a paramount advocate for the creation of the proposed states that the property was in alliance with the AG. In the West, the opposition party was the NCNC. The policies of the party differed from the action groups only in the sense that it stood for a unitary rather than a federal constitution for Nigeria. In the East, the opposition parties were the Action Group and the United National Independent Party, UNIP, a breakaway faction of the NCNC. Between 1953 and December 1959, there was no constitutional advancement in Nigeria because the British held firmly to their constitutional framework of a tripartite Nigeria. Secondly, the regional political leaders initiated their own concepts of rulership in their respective areas of government. Thirdly, the same political leaders strove to keep their hold on their own regions. However, while two southern leaders aspired to gain followership in the other regions, the northern leader only strove to keep his firm grip on the north. How could such a grip alone ensure his political aspirations? The answer to this question could only be found in the Tripartition Act. By this act, the British deliberately placed a greater percentage of the land and people of Nigeria in the north, putting the percentages of population at 54.5% north, 20.0% west, 23.0% east, and 2.5% southern Cameroon, which was then part of Nigeria. As a result, the British gave the north 55% of the federal constituencies, which ensured that if the NPC succeeded in maintaining its hold on the north, which it actually did with the active support of the British, it will be in control at the federal level. Thus, the stage was set for the federal election of December 1959, which was meant to usher in the political independence of Nigeria. The result of that election were a foregone conclusion. The NPC won 145 48 seats, the NCNC and the NEPU 89 seats, and the Action Group and UMBC 75 seats. These results showed that the effort by the Southern leaders to gain followership in the North had succeeded to some extent. They also showed that the masses of the North would not go with the NPC oligarchy if they were allowed the freedom of political expression. Again, the results showed that if the political parties of the South joined hands together and tactfully worked out their fortunes with the political mass movement of the North, a political alliance would emerge, which, if adroitly led, would gain power at the federal level. Although Awolowo had agreed to make the NCNC the senior partner in an alliance of the Southern parties, Dr. Azikiwe did not seize the golden opportunity to install at the federal level a government of progressive forces of the South and North. Of course, NPC did threaten that if the Southern parties allied to capture power at the federal level, the North would secede from Nigeria, unless the British were prepared to back it up with their own superior force of arms. Did you hear that? Good. As it happened, the ready British deposition to back up the NPC, coupled with the latent antipathy of some NCNC leaders against the Action Group, led the NCNC to team up with the NPC to form the government in December 1959. The NPC became the senior partner in that government, and the deputy leader of the party, Alhaji Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, who had led the NPC at the federal level since 1954, became the first prime minister of Nigeria. The NPC shared the ministerial appointments with the NCNC, which selfishly abandoned its northern ally, the NEPU, so that the latter took no part in the running of the federal government. The first betrayer. Then independence. At independence, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, who gave up his premiership of Eastern Nigeria in 1959 in order to lead his party at the federal level, was sworn in as the first indigenous Governor General in place of the outgoing British incumbent, Sir James Robertson. Chief Awolowo also gave up his premiership in the West in 1959 to lead his party at federal level. His party did not join in the coalition government at the center, and he emerged as the leader of the opposition in the federal parliament. But the Sardauna of Sokoto, who did not give up his premiership of the North and who did not seek to lead his party at the federal level, remained the premier of the northern region. In the West, Chief Akintola, who was the deputy leader of the Action Group, became the premier of the region from 1959, while in the East, deputy leader of the NCNC, Dr. Michael Okpara, became the premier. And so, when the independence of Nigeria was ushered in on October 1st, 1960, it seemed as if the political arrangements in Nigeria had been fairly and equitably settled. Actually, a time bomb had been buried deep into the foundation of the political edifice. So, with the passing of time, the bomb was bound to blow up the whole edifice, unless it was diffused by a cautious operation of the delicate tripartition upon which the edifice was laid. while it seemed as if each of the political leaders wanted the edifice to remain intact, it could be seen that the parties in the South had hoped that the edifice would be preserved by their own progress in gathering more followership in the North. But the NPC held the opposite view, that the edifice would be preserved only if it kept the North permanently in its hands, while it sought to control the South through allies or agents. The first few weeks of independence witnessed an apparent calm in the political atmosphere of the country, which seemed to augur well for the peaceful development of the nation, provided that those who made the laws of the land were prepared to abide by the terms of their own laws. There was reason to be optimistic that all would be well with Nigeria. At any time in the affairs of men, it is not the law that enforces itself, it is the people. If the rule of law was to prevail, the rulers of the people must be prepared at all times to live above board. They themselves have to be scrupulous in observing the law, which is the very basis for the continuity of the society. The constitution which ushered in Nigeria independence had provided for a ruling government and alternative government in opposition. The government was to rule according to the law, while the opposition was to check the excesses of the government. The responsibility devolved on both sides to observe the law of the game for the sake of fair play and acceptability by both parties or both sides. The first test of the sincerity of the NPC-controlled federal government came in March 1961, when the figures of the newly conducted census started to trickle out. The figures revealed that the South had a higher population than the North. If those figures had been accepted by Balewa government, the consequent readjustment of the federal constituency would have put more federal seats in the South. It would therefore have become possible for either of the parties in the South to emerge as a senior partner in any future coalition government, which could embrace even the NPC. But the NPC fumed at such a possibility, and the Balewa government proceeded to reject the census figures completely. It went further to schedule a recount for 1963. Thus, it was being made clear that the ruling NPC would not take kindly any erosion of its power, no matter how legitimate the erosion might be. Also, by March 1961, the Balewa government had passed into a law, a banking act, which was meant to strike at the basis of existence of the National Bank of Nigeria and similar banking institutions. If the law were to take effect, it would immediately destroy the National Bank of Nigeria, as well as the finances of the Western Nigerian government, which at that time was controlled by the Action Group, the party that was in opposition in the federal parliament. But the aggrieved parties, the owners of the National Bank of Nigeria, went to court. Fortunately for them, the federal court presided over by Justice Dadi Onyama ruled against the federal government and declared the law null and void. The National Bank was saved, and with it, all indigenous banking institutions in Nigeria. But the judiciary that gave the ruling against the Balewa government started to be intimidated or undermined, so that within the following 3 years, it had ceased to be a force that could stand for the rights of the people in the face of an obvious government high-handedness. and tyranny. So thank you so much. Let's go to the opposition, Obafemi Awolowo. The ultimate question that decided the political continuity of Nigeria under the NPC leadership was whether the Balewa government would continue to tolerate an opposition in the federal parliament or try to discredit and destroy that opposition in order to hold an undisputed sway over the entire nation. The answer to this question hinged on his attitude towards the Action Group, which constituted the main opposition party in the Federal House of Assembly, or whose leader, Chief Awolowo, was recognized as the leader of opposition in the parliament. According to the law of the land, it was mandatory for government to always allow the opposition to have its say. This is universally accepted as the guiding light in any democracy. On the other hand, the opposition was supposed to give constructive and not destructive criticism of the system. Nigeria has always been proclaimed a democratic country. If the light should be dimmed or extinguished at any time in any democracy, the system could at once be seen to be heading for the rocks, as was the case in Nigeria. Within the first few months of independence, the federal government had shown itself unwilling to have or live with the opposition. Perhaps there was something African in that disposition. The original African democracy did not institutionalize opposition. Whenever an issue arose, there could be specific opposition to that issue. When the issue had been resolved, the specific opposition would fizzle out and life would return to normal. Whenever another issue arose, a new specific opposition, perhaps involving new personalities, would arise, and so on. However, in a modern democracy, particularly the British style, the ruling government is elected for a specified number of years. After the elections, the opposition does not have to fizzle out and disappear. Rather, it is institutionalized, and it sees itself as an alternative government and a possible successor to the ruling government. Since Nigeria essayed to run a democracy on the British model, the ruling government needed not have seen the constitutional opposition as a confrontational group. But because it saw the opposition in that light, it made deliberate and determined effort to stifle and wipe out the opposition. As a result, it became obvious to an independent observer that Nigeria was heading for the rocks. Although the NPC needed an agent in the West and also in the East to strengthen its hold on the nation, much depends on the type of agent that it got and the relative political powers of such agents. In the West, the NPC found such an agent in Chief Akintola, who was both the premier of Western Nigeria and the deputy leader of the Action Group. Unlike Chief Awolowo, who really favored a radical solution to the problems of Nigeria and supported the creation of more states in the Federation, Chief Akintola favored the conservative approach and was more concerned with sharing the spoils of office with the NPC government at the center. In effect, if Akintola had his way, he would have made the Action Group to ally with the NPC, take whatever share of the federal patronage he was given, and leave the suffering masses of the West, of the North, and the people of the South to their own fate. If Awolowo would not accept that line of action, he believed in fighting for those principles and rights that he held dear. Hence, there was a crisis in the action group. Matters came to a head in May 1962 when the action group executive found Akintola guilty of maladministration and anti-party activities. He was asked to resign both his appointment as the deputy leader of the party and his premiership. He recalcitrated. As a follow-up, a majority of the action group members of the Western House of Assembly petitioned the governor of the region, Oba Adesoji Aderemi, the Ooni of Ife, to remove Chief Akintola from the premiership of the region and replace him with Chief Adegbenro, who was a more stable and loyal member of the party. This, of course, was possible under the parliamentary system of government those days, when parliamentarians held both legislative and executive powers and could by a simple majority vote any incumbent out of office. In effect, Chief Awolowo was stage managing the Western Nigerian government from without. This was not in the best interest of that government. There was no doubt that the differences between himself and his deputy, Chief Akintola, were political. If he had suffered the latter to remain in the government until the next regional election, already slated for 1965, the whole crisis would most probably have been avoided. Of course, Chief Awolowo might have feared that the apparent disloyalty of his deputy would cost his party the loss of the pending federal elections of 1964. If so, his hard line of approach certainly did not reverse that loss. Rather, it made matters worse. The governor acted on the petition and removed Chief Akintola from office, appointing Chief Adegbenro in his place. But the former refused to quit the office and took the matter to court. In turn, he claimed to have dismissed the governor from office. However, the newly appointed premier, Chief Adegbenro, summoned the House of Assembly for a vote of confidence in his new government. As soon as the matter came up for discussion in the House, the few supporters of Akintola started an uproar which disturbed the proceedings. One of them broke the mace, the symbol of authority of the House. Acting on the orders of the Prime Minister, Sir Abubakar, the police immediately entered the House and dispersed the members with tear gas. No votes were taken. Within a moment of dispersing of the House, Sir Abubakar had stepped fully into the crisis. He summoned Parliament, which declared a state of emergency throughout Nigeria and went further to suspend the legitimate government of Western Nigeria, replacing newly appointed premier with an administrator, Dr. Moses Majekodunmi. Until his appointment, Dr. Majekodunmi was a minister in Sir Abubakar's government. He was also the personal physician and friend of the Prime Minister. Troops of the Nigerian army were mobilized to maintain law and order in the region. The federal government proceeded at once to deal with Chief Awolowo and his closest followers, not only in the Western region, but also in the East and the North. These men were ordered to be restricted to places far away from their political bases. Action Group Party functionaries were scattered, and many were detained. Every effort was made to destroy both the image and the credibility of Awolowo as a leader and of the Action Group as a political party. Within his first few weeks in office, the new administrator had called on the federal government to institute an inquiry into the activities of 6 statutory corporations of Western Nigeria. The inquiry was quickly set up. It was headed by Justice G.B. Coker. While the inquiry was going on, Chief Awolowo and 27 of his leading assistants and party functionaries were placed under arrest and charged with treasonable felony on the grounds that they planned to stage a revolution. By November 1962, the trials had begun before Mr. Justice SH0CK, and it continued into mid-1963. In the meantime, the report of the Coker Commission, which was released in December 1962, was favorable to Chief Akintola. Therefore, rather than conduct a free and fair election, as was expected by honest and fair-minded Nigerian citizens everywhere, the Balewa government simply reinstalled Chief Akintola as the premier of the Western region, while a leader of the NCNC, Chief Fadahunsi, was appointed the new governor of the Western House of Assembly for 3 months. And when finally he did, he still had a very rough time trying to face up Angono. Right, so let's take that again. So Chief Fadahunsi was appointed as a governor, as the new governor of the Western House of Assembly for 3 months. And when finally he did, he still had a very rough time trying to face up the remaining members of the action group. The NCNC members of the House played the decisive role by throwing in their lot with Akintola's men of the newly formed United People's Party, UPP. Thus, Akintola achieved a small but shifty majority in the House. The action group became the opposition party. Meanwhile, the action filed in court by Chief Akintola before the emergency, challenging the validity of his dismissal from office by the former governor, Oba Aderemi, had gone as far as the British Privy Council for final ruling. Before Nigeria became a republic on October 1st, 1963, appeals could be made to that august body by citizens of Nigeria. In this case, the Privy Council completely vindicated the former governor's action, declaring Chief Adegbenro the lawful premier of Western Nigeria. As soon as this judgment was published in Nigeria, both the Balewa and the Akintola government acted promptly to stop the enforcement of the judgment in the country. In this questionable way, Akintola clung to his premiership of the Western region. By September 1963, judgment was given in the trial of Awolowo and others facing the treasonable felony charge. The prosecution had alleged that plans were made to overthrow the Balewa's government by a popular non-military revolution. It was also alleged that men were sent to Ghana for training and that firearms and ammunition had been illegally imported. In his judgment, the trial judge, Mr. Justice SH0CK, did not declare that the prosecution had proved his case beyond all reasonable doubt. Rather, he declared that he had no choice except to convict 18 of the accused. This included Chief Awolowo and his notable aides like Alhaji Lateef Jakonde, Chief Onitiri, Omishade, Olawoyin, and also Ayo Akinsanya and Okotie Yesin. He sentenced them to various terms of imprisonment ranging from 2 to 10 years. So, Midwestern region. Towards the end of 1963, the Midwestern region was created. This was done by exercising it out of the Western region by a direct act of the Balewa government. It was through that That area contained all the minority group of the region, and it was generally accepted by progressive Nigerians that there was need to break down the three giant regions into smaller regions to make for more stability in the country. However, to excise a region out of only the western region, which incidentally was the smallest of the three regions, and at a time when the region had only just come under the ambit of the Balewa government savored of political victimization. Why, for instance, were the Middle Belt and the Calabar Ogoja River regions, which were also hotly demanded, not excised out of the northern and eastern regions, respectively. Elections were held into the new Midwestern Regional House of Assembly in February 1964. The NCNC, which had profited as much as the NPC from the action group crisis, had rose gallantly to the occasion. It fought against the Midwest Democratic Front, a newly formed party, which was backed by the NPC. Thus, the two parties that formed the federal coalition government of Alhaji Tafawa Balewa were fighting each other in the Midwest elections. The NCNC won 53 out of 64 seats, and thus became the ruling party in that new region. The opposition was composed of the MDF, which won 11 seats. By this success, the NCNC had become a formidable party in the country. It was now controlling two regions, the East and the Midwest. It was also sharing power with the Akintola government in the West and was part of the Balewa government at the center. Therefore, it had cause to be confident of winning the next federal elections, slated for that same year. The population recount of 1963 was forecast to give no less than 50% of the population to the South. This made the NCNC more confident than before. On top of all this, the political situation in the North was becoming worse for the Sardauna government. Soon after independence, the Tifi of Benue province, who were the backbone of the UMBC, became more articulate in demanding for their political rights, which were denied them by the Sardauna government. Agitation and rioting became the order of the day. Rather than make concessions to them, the Sardauna simply used force to suppress them the more. Early in 1963, when moves were made to create the Midwest region, the TP accordingly intensified their political war against the northern government. But the same MPC government which gladly excised the Midwest out of the West did not deem it fit to attend to the agitation of the TIFs, the TIF people, for their own region. Instead, having failed to subjugate them by the use of anti-riot police, the Sardauna started sending troops of the Nigerian army to quell the agitation in February 1964. This double standard showed clearly to independent observers, such as the soldiers of the Nigerian army, that the government of Sardauna and Balewa of NPC did not intend to govern Nigeria peacefully and progressively, but sought to cut down their political opponents. The NCNC had expected to profit immensely from the northern situation, where the popularity of the Sardauna was waning, and thus have the bet of both worlds by sharing government of the center with the NPC and seeking at the same time to be its greatest opponent and supplanter. But it was soon disillusioned. First, the Balewa government manipulated the census figures and announced a 55% population figure for the North, thus ensuring that the NPC perpetuated its power at the center. The NCNC became furious and dissented. it rejected the figures and suggested the recount. The Balewa government insisted that any objection to the figures should be pursued at the high courts of the Federation. In this way, Balewa silenced much of the opposition, although the controversy continued. Secondly, a majority of the western wing of the NCNC merged themselves with the UPP in the Western House of Assembly to form a new political party called the Nigerian National Democratic Party, NNDP. This party, like the UPP, took a conservative stance on national issues and sought to share the national cake with the NPC. Interesting, yeah? So we are now going on to the 1964 election. Having lost their western wing, the NCNC now sought new political friends in the Action Group, and the coalition was joined by the...
Hello, my wonderful people. As we have finished watching this interesting video, please, I want to see your comment, your contribution, your opinion in the comment section. Like I said earlier, let us do it constructively. Tell me what you think about this video that you have just watched, and also about the platform. If you haven't subscribed, what are you waiting for? Please remember to subscribe, put on your notification bell, share this video, and remain blessed.